Okay, so just waiting for that recording to start. Okay, I think we are up and running as far as the recording is concerned. So I will officially then go to my slides and start with our presentation for this morning. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for all the confirmation. So let's get into it, ladies and gents. Okay, so welcome to our next online session, our online class for FAC 2601, Financial Accounting for Companies. This is our fifth online class that we're presenting in our series, trying to cover basically all the lesson tools that you need to master before writing your final exam at the end of the semester. By way of introduction, my name is Frank Montgomery, one of your lecturers for this module. I am based at the Makkelneuk main campus, which you will find my office in the Simon Radaperry building on the second floor, office number 31. That is my personal email address and my contact number at the office in Pretoria. So just a few house rules. This session, as I've said, is recorded. And then obviously, once we are done with the session, and we will upload this recording on your module site so that you can go back and review if there are still any issues that you might have. And obviously also to the advantage of those that can't join us this morning. So just on our module site, if you scroll down on the navigation tab, towards the bottom, you'll find all the different online classes. So just look up online class 5 and you will find the recording there. It is just easier to allow you to ask your questions at the end of the sessions through our Q&A section where you responded now that you can hear and see me. So as I go along, you do have any questions, just write them down and then I will address all those at the end of the session. As I've said, it just makes it easier because during the session, I can't see those questions. But I will address all of them at the end of the session, any questions you might have on our class of today. Again, I've already indicated, yes, the session will be made available on MyUniso on Moodle. On your module site, the recording will be made available. Okay, you've already encountered the other two colleagues on this module, my two colleagues, the other two lecturers, Mr. Baloy and Mr. Isley, who have presented some of the previous classes. The best way normally to get in touch with all of us is through our module email box, which is fac2601@uniso.ac.za. One of us is always there in that mailbox to assist with your queries that you might have. Just allow us sufficient time. We try for a turnaround time within 24 hours to get back to you and respond to any queries and issues you might have. Alternatively, you can use the message function on Moodle to send direct messages to us. And another option is through the discussion forum, which you will also find on our module site. So in the discussion forum, you can engage in any discussion that you want on a specific topic. Say, for example, lesson tool 5, investment property. You can start a session there, or you can just respond or correspond to other sessions or other discussion forums already started on our module site. And we will also drop in from time to time to assist and resolve any issues that there might be regarding a specific discussion going on. So then, as far as the content of today's class is, as we've indicated up front when we announced the session, it will be covering investment property, which is lesson 2 or learning unit number 6 in your study material. It is governed by the International Accounting Standard 40, dealing specifically with investment property. So the structure and the content of this lecture will first of all be to cover the theory surrounding investment property, what is important to know, how to identify, classify, and recognize investment property. And then once we've run through all the theory surrounding investment property, to look at some practical examples typical type of questions, scenarios that you might get in an assessment exam situation, how to approach those questions and examples then in answering them successfully then for an assessment on an exam. So yes, that is in the content of our lecture today, our class, covering investment property, IAS 40, the theory surrounding investment property, identification, classification, recognition, disclosure, and then looking at practical examples, how to address this in practice. So starting off with a definition for investment property. So IAS 40 stipulates it is any property that is held to earn rental income or for capital appreciation, or it might be for both reasons. So the main intention with this type of property is important. So if it is quite clear that the property is obtained to rent it out to a third party. So the main reason is not for us to utilize a property to produce something or to occupy the property as our office building or manufacturing plant. We own the property, but the main intention is to rent out the property and earn rental income. Then it will be classified as an investment property, because the rental income that we will earn there is our income from the property, but it is not the main business activity of the company. So it might be a manufacturing company that manufactures products. That is your main business. But in addition, they also have a property that they currently are only renting out, not utilizing in the production process and not self-occupying it. So the pure intention is to earn rental from that. And then obviously it will classify as investment property. Your second possibility is for capital appreciation. Capital appreciation meaning we obtain this property. We are going to keep this property for a extensive period of time in the hope that it will increase in value, because that is what capital appreciation is all about. So in this process of keeping this property but not using it for production purposes, not occupying it, simply keeping it for the long term in the hope that it will increase in value, with then maybe the intention to sell it in future, then it again will classify as an investment property. Or this property can have both. We can rent it out, and while renting it out over an extended period of time, it might also increase in capital value. So again, both definition requirements met, it will be classified as investment property. So the main thing is here is important. This is not your main business activity, but through owning this property, we are earning rental income. It is increasing in value. We are not using it in the production process to produce items. We are not occupying it. Then it can only be classified in terms of IAS 40 as an investment property. So investment property is therefore, as I've specified, not property held for use in the production or supply of goods. So this specific item of property that we own, we are not using it to produce or supply any goods or services, and it's also not used for administrative purposes as an office building, for example. Because if you are occupying it for administrative purposes, it is basically used in your main business activities. And that is an important distinction then between the different types of properties that we might have, or how we utilize those properties. So if it is not held for the use in production or supply of goods or services, or utilized for administrative purposes, it can't be investment property. So if you use it in the production or supply, or use it for administrative purposes, it won't be investment property. But if we don't use this property to produce or supply the goods, or we use it for administrative purposes by occupying the property, then it will be classified as investment property. Therefore, investment property generates cash flows, because if you rent it out, the cash flow is the rental income. But this cash flow is independent of the other assets held by the entity. In other words, independently earned other than the main business activity. So if you are a manufacturing concern, your main business is manufacturing products to sell it. Through the sales, you generate the income, which is your main business activity. This is also an activity in which cash flows will be generated, but it's independent from the main purpose or what the other assets are used for. So the manufacturing assets are used to produce the products. The investment property is not used to produce the products. It's only there to obtain rental income. And this is then specifically what distinguishes investment property from owner-occupied property, and owner-occupied property, which falls then under IAS 16, property, plant and equipment, which is the previous lesson or class that you had regarding PPE. And that is the important distinction there to make is, even though there's also cash flows, like from other assets, it's independent from these assets. In other words, it is not used in the production process to produce something or supply a service. And there is the distinction then between your investment property and owner-occupied property, which needs to be treated differently in terms of either owner-occupied IAS 16, investment property IAS 40. So some examples of investment property, seeing that we have covered now the definition of what classifies specific as investment property. It is any land held for long-term capital appreciation rather than for short-term sale in ordinary course of business. So if the intention is there, once we've purchased the land and obtained the ownership, to keep it for long-term capital appreciation rather than a short-term sale, then obviously it will be classified as investment property. If you've got any land held for a currently undetermined future use, so we have this land, but we're not sure, are we going to develop it for our own purposes, or are we going to keep it as investment property? So if it is not clear, once we've obtained this land, so we have not yet determined what we will use this land for, then IAS 40 stipulates that such land should be regarded as held for capital appreciation. So if you haven't made your intention clear, you have this land, it can still be developed as either a property, plant and equipment, or just keep it for capital appreciation. If this intention is not initially clear, it is clearly stipulated in terms of IAS 40 that this needs to be regarded as held for capital appreciation, and therefore it will be investment property. Any building owned by the entity or a right of use asset relating to a building held by the entity. Now, we have not yet covered a right of use asset. You will do this in the next lesson too, but just to bring you into terms with the examples and definitions of investment property. A right of use asset is where we have a lease agreement with a third party to exclusively use a certain asset. So even though you don't have the ownership right of the asset, you have the exclusivity to use this asset how and whenever you want to use it. That is then referred to as a right of use asset. So if we either own an asset or have a right of use asset in terms of your lease contract, and we lease these items out under one or more short-term lease, it will be classified as investment property, because a short-term lease means it is for the short term specifically to generate rental income, which is then earned independently from your main business activities. And in terms of the definition, it will classify as an investment property. Alternatively, if a building is vacant at the current stage, but it is held to be leased out under one or more short-term lease. So we've got a vacant building, and the intention there is to rent it out again to earn rental income independently from your main cash flow activities. Again, such a building should be classified as your investment property. Any property that is being constructed constructed or developed for future use as investment property. So again, there the intention should be clear. We are busy with the construction or development of a new property, and this property is mainly constructed to be utilized as investment property in future. In other words, to either rent out or for capital appreciation or for both purposes. Then it still fits in the definition, even though it is not a completed asset as yet, but it still fit within the definition requirements of IAS 40 and should be classified as investment property. So those are some examples of what could be classified and what should be recognized as investment property. On the other side of the scale, examples of items that are not investment property and which will then not be covered by the scope of the standard, but obviously fall within the scope of another standard. Property intended for sale in the ordinary course of business or in the process of construction or development for such sale is covered under IAS 2 inventories. Because if the intention is to produce something, this asset to sell it, it works the same as inventory. It is basically just seen as inventory that are going to be sold, and this, it can't be categorized as investment property, but it rather falls under the accounting standard IAS 2 inventories. So any property that we acquired exclusively with a view to subsequent disposal in the near future or for development and resale. Okay, so we obtain this property, we develop it with the intention to sell it again. It won't be seen as investment property because it's not for capital appreciation. It is to make a profit on the sale of the item. And this will all fall under IAS 2 inventory, which will cover the standard to be applied in such instances, and it can't be recognized as investment property. Any owner-occupied property, as we have already said in your previous lesson too, we have covered property, plant, and equipment. So if we own and occupy a property, it can't be seen as investment property because then it won't be rented out and it won't be kept for capital appreciation. Owner-occupied property includes a property held for future use as owner-occupied property. So if we specifically identify that we obtained this property and in future to occupy it for our own business purposes, then the intention is there. It can't be seen as investment property, but it will be owner-occupied property in future, and it will be governed through under IAS 16 PPE. Any property held for future development and subsequent use as owner-occupied property. Same principle applies here. If you are busy developing a property with the intention to occupy it in future, once again, it will form part of IAS 16 and not be, or you can't classify it as investment property. Any property occupied by our employees, whether or not the employees pay rent at market rates, they will be seen as owner-occupied property because it's occupied by employees, meaning you can't rent out that property, and therefore it should fall under IAS 16 property, plant, and equipment. Any owner-occupied property awaiting disposal. So from time to time, even though the intention was to keep a property for a long period of time, it has been owner-occupied, but now it became maybe redundant. So the initial intention was not to buy and resell it, so it can't be IAS 16. The initial intention, or it was owner-occupied, so it can't be investment property. So even though we are going to sell this property, it will still be classified as a property, plant, and equipment under IAS 16. Any property that is leased to another entity under a lease agreement is a long-term agreement. So it's not short-term, where you just earn the rental income. It is over a number of years in terms of the lease agreement. And once you cover the next lesson 2 on leases, you will see that a lease agreement has specific stipulations. If we comply to that, we have a situation where we create a right of use asset. So this right of use asset won't be seen as property, plant, and equipment. Won't be seen as investment property, but it will fall part of your PPE. The right to use asset will be seen, even though you don't have the ownership, in terms of the lease agreement, it is classified as part of your property, plant, and equipment. Now, some properties comprise and consist of different portions, which can be held part as investment property and the other part as owner-occupied property. You might have a building with a number of floors. Some of the floors might be used to be occupied by your staff for administrative purposes to conduct their normal day-to-day running. But it might be that, say, some of the top floors of the building aren't required to be used. There's space available. And then the company might decide to earn rental income on that and rent it out. So this means you've got one single building that have owner-occupied component as well as investment property component. So how do you classify such an asset? Will it fall under IAS 16 PPE or under IAS 40 investment property? If the portions could be sold separately or leased out separately under a lease, and a company or entity accounts for the portions separately. So if you can sell the owner-occupied separate from the investment part, then they can be classified separately. However, in a single building, it will be difficult to sell, say, the first two floors from the next two floors. So in that instance, if the portions could not be sold separately, the property is classified as investment property only if an insignificant portion is held for use in the production or supply of goods or services or as administrative purposes. So if you can sell it separately, you can classify it separately as property, plant and equipment, investment property. If not possible to make this distinction, it will be seen as investment property only if there's an insignificant portion allocated to be owner occupied. Now we'll get later to examples this because this insignificant portion needs to be determined by the company itself, because what is seen as insignificant, it will have to be based, for example, on floor space maybe. How much floor space is occupied for the by the company itself, and how much floor space is occupied that is rented out as investment property. So if the floor space occupied by the owners is, for example, only 10 or 20%, and the floor space rented out is 80%, then it can be seen that it is an insignificant portion that is held in the use in production or supply of goods or services or occupied for administrative purposes, say, for example, only 20%. So 80% is rented out, and therefore that total building could be classified as investment property only. So you won't make a distinction between PPE and investment property. The entire building will be seen as investment property if the PPE part or the owner-occupied part is seen to be an insignificant portion. But that will be dependent on company to company, and they will have to stipulate that clearly in their accounting policy and notes what is seen as insignificant in order to have a correct classification where property consists of portions held partially for investment as well as for owner occupation. So once that we have identified something as fulfilling the requirements and definitions of investment property, how do we recognize it, or when can we recognize it? It should be probable that future economic benefits will flow to the entity. So if you have, or if you are renting out the property, there most probably will be an agreement in place. And based on that agreement, the probable future economic benefit will be in the form of the rental income that you receive. If the property is held for capital appreciation, if it does indeed increase in value, that probable future economic benefit will be the increased value that we can receive if we sell that property in future. So there needs to be probable future economic benefits associated with the property. Secondly, the cost of the investment property can be measured reliably, because obviously to recognize investment property, just like an item of property, plant and equipment, you need to be able to measure the value. So that will be the initial cost of the investment property. So in order to be recognized, there should be future economic benefits that is probable, and we should be able to measure the cost of the investment property in order to recognize it. An entity evaluates under this recognition principle all its investment property costs at the time they are incurred. And these could include the following. Initially, the cost to acquire the investment property, which will normally be your cost price. So just as we had with property, plant and equipment, all costs associated with obtaining the property needs to be included. So therefore, initially, obviously, the cost price, and then subsequently to add to or replace part of or service a property. So any of those subsequent costs can be any operational or any ongoing operational expenses, such as levies that needs to be paid, your taxes with regards to the building itself, payable to your municipality, the insurance expense to cover the property, any maintenance costs, okay, any maintenance costs required to enhance the value of the property. So normally it won't include repairs, because repairs is just to restore it to its original value. The subsequent costs that are capitalized needs to enhance the value of a property. So any of those subsequent costs then are basically capitalized and add to the value of the original cost to acquire investment property. The initial cost will be not only the cost price, but also including any transaction costs, any professional fees for legal services to draw up a contract to obtain the property, your property transfer taxes, your duties, and any other transaction costs that you might have to register, for example, a bond on the property, your initial insurance expense, any conveyancing fees payable with obtaining this property. So exactly as we've had with property, plant and equipment, over and above the cost price, also look at all transaction costs directly related, necessary and required to obtain ownership of the investment property. If it is necessary and applicable, it will be added to the cost price and capitalized as part of the initial value that we measure to recognize your investment property at. As far as measurement is concerned, if the parties to the contract agree that the payment for the investment property is deferred, in other words, upfront on the transaction date, you don't pay the full amount. You defer payment to a later period, maybe in 6 months' time. The cost is measured at the present value of the future payments. So based on the future payments that need to be made, we will do a time value measurement of what the cost is, because the cost being deferred can still be measured according to the time value calculation and is reliable. So even though there is not a cost and a transaction price on the date of the transaction, by utilizing the time value of money calculation based on the future cash flows, we can accurately determine the present value of such a investment property. So even though the cost is being deferred, we can still accurately measure, and it is a reliable amount that we can measure. So even though there's not initial outflow, we can still recognize that present value as the cost of obtaining the investment property. Same principle applies, which had in property, plant and equipment as well. Okay, so if it is deferred, simply look at the future cash flows, use your time value calculations, determine the present value, and that is the value to be recognized as the cost of the investment property. As far as subsequent measurement is concerned, so as we've said, initial measurement, the cost plus all transaction costs associated with obtaining the investment property. As far as subsequent measurement is concerned, the entity has the option to use either the fair value or the cost model. Important though, as its accounting policy, if they choose the fair value, they shall apply and utilize a fair value to all of its investment property items. Okay, which was not necessarily the case with property, plant, and equipment. So here, initially, you recognize investment property at a cost. Then subsequently, you can either use the fair value or the cost model. Whichever one you choose needs to be applied right throughout then. So if you choose the cost model, all investment properties shall be disclosed and measured at cost. So you can't have certain investment properties at cost and certain at fair value. Once you've made the subsequent measurement, your policy, it needs to be applied strictly throughout for all future investment properties as well. So either the fair value or the cost model needs to be chosen and then applied throughout for all investment property items. You can't have a bid at fair and a bid at cost. What is the fair value of investment property? First of all, if you choose the fair value model, obviously you have to determine the fair value. If you choose the cost model though, then obviously you will keep the investment property at its original cost recognized, so it's not necessary for the fair value. But IAS 40 still requires that the fair value must be determined, irrespective if you're using the cost or the fair value model. The standard requires all entities to determine the fair value of the investment property for purpose of either measurement. So if you're going to use the fair value model, then obviously you have to measure and determine the fair value. If, however, you choose the cost model, you still have to determine the fair value and simply discloses it in your financial notes. So you will still disclose the investment property at cost, but in the notes, you need to disclose what is the current fair value of this specific item. Obviously, if you've chosen the fair value, it is straightforward. The fair value will be recognized and disclosed in the financial statements. There won't be a difference between the value disclosed and what is reflective in the notes itself. But still, even by choosing the cost model, the fair value still needs to be determined. You will remain to disclose the investment property at the cost, but you also need to disclose separately the fair value of that specific investment property is kept at cost. As far as fair value is concerned, an entity is encouraged but not required to determine the fair value of investment property on the basis of a valuation by independent valuer. So get in a professional person that is basically making a living out of valuations and determining fair value of properties. A person who holds a recognized and relevant professional qualification and does have recent experience specifically in the type of properties that we are dealing with and the location in which the properties are located. Because depending on whether in Gauteng, Western Cape, Eastern Cape, wherever, there might be a difference in the values associated with properties, as well as obviously the category and type of investment properties being valued. So the company can themselves determine these fair values. It is not a requirement that they should have a independent valuer, but it is recommended and best practice to get in the experienced professional who's got the experience and the qualifications to accurately determine and associate a fair value with specific types of investments, investment properties, depending on the category and type of property, as well as the location in which you find that property. What is fair value? I think you would have already determined this in previous learning tools, lesson tools. That is the price that would be received to sell an asset or which you are willing to pay to transfer liability in an orderly transaction between market participants at the measurement date. So that is on a specific date. If you go, for example, today to a shop, you want to buy a bread, the fair value of the bread is the cost as advertised by the supplier. There is a willing seller and buyer. You are willing to take a part of your money to buy the bread, and you will give the money then, and in exchange receive the bread. So that is determined to be the fair value, a willing buyer and seller Exactly the same principle applies with regards to properties as well. So as far as the measurement of the fair value is concerned for investment property, it needs to be determined at a specific point in time, which is either transaction date or at the end of the financial year, if you have chosen to value assets at fair value. What is the current fair value? So if I want to sell it now, based on market conditions, what will a willing buyer be prepared to pay for that property that will be agreed upon by both parties? And that is to be considered the fair value in a normal transaction, in an arm's length transaction between two parties. And that is considered to be a fair value. And that is why it's important then maybe to get in an independent valuer with the qualification to determine what is the current sort of market value of these types of properties. So after initial recognition, as we've said, an entity that chooses the fair value model should then measure all of its investment properties at fair value. You can't then change or go back to cost. You need to continue at fair value for all these investment properties, with one exception. When there is a clear evidence where the entity first acquires an investment property, so you've already identified that this meets the definition and recognition requirements of investment property, but it is not possible to determine that the fair value is measurable on a continuing basis. So even though it meets the requirements of investment property, you have chosen to utilize the fair value for subsequent measurement, but it's clear that it's going to be difficult to determine the fair value of this investment property reliably on a continuing basis. IAS 40 allows one then to, if this is the case, and only when, which could be the case of the market for comparable properties in inactive. So the type of property that you have, there hasn't been a recent transaction to determine a fair value, meaning it will be difficult to accurately measure what is the fair value of this property. Okay, so there are few recent transactions, there are no price quotations, there are not current observed transaction prices indicating that the seller was forced to sell. Because if you are forced to sell, you will accept a lower value for the property, which is not then an accurate reflection of the true fair value of that specific property. And if there are no alternative reliable measurements for the fair value available, for example, if you use discounted cash flow projections, so if that is also not an option available, one can measure that investment property using the cost model still. So even though you are applying the fair value, you need to use the fair value for investment properties. You've got the specific property where it's difficult to have a reliable measurement of what the actual fair value is. Okay, so your independent appraiser can't determine the fair value based on the fact that there are not recent transactions. It's impossible to determine from discounted cash flow projections what a future value or the fair value might be. In that instance, that specific property, IAS 40 allows one to keep it at cost and use the cost model for that property. So any gain or loss arising from a change in the fair value of investment property, because remember now, initially you recognize investment property at a cost, including all transaction costs. If you then adopt the fair value for future valuations, you will have to determine the future value or the fair value at the end of each financial year. Then one needs to compare that fair value with the original cost. If there's a difference between the two values, in other words, if the value is increased, it means there's a gain in the value of the investment property. If the fair value, however, is less than the original cost, there is a loss arising from the fair value that is being considered at the end of the year. Any gain or loss, even though it is not realized yet, because remember, the property is not yet sold, you still own the property, but those gains or losses should still be recognized in the profit or loss for the period in which it arises. And that is considered and seen as being a fair value adjustment. We make an adjustment for the fair value because remember, it will be adjusted on a year-on-year basis. When you eventually sell that asset, it will cancel out all these adjustments that have been made regarding the fair value. but the yearly adjustments still needs to be recognized in your profit or loss section. A gain obviously be seen as a profit, a loss be seen as a loss in your financial statements. If you use the cost model, though, after initial recognition, an entity that chooses a cost model shall measure its investment property, all of them at cost, and then you will also then provide depreciation on them, just like we did with PPE. So if you use a cost model, you will need to depreciate because it will decrease in value over a period of time. So all investment property will be shown at the original cost, less accumulated depreciation written off over the lifespan of the investment property. And we should also make a provision for any impairment losses according to IAS 16. The impairment loss, if you are aware that there is definitely going to be a devaluation in the value of the property, you need to make a provision for any impairment loss. It means what is the actual value you can expect for that property, which will be less than the current carrying amount. So at the end of each financial year, you look at the carrying amount, original cost less accumulated depreciation, determine the current sort of a value that you can expect for that property. And if it is quite clear that the value is less than the current carrying amount, it is considered to be an impairment loss. Okay, it means that your carrying amount exceeds the recoverable amount on that property. The recoverable amount is normally your fair value associated with the specific property based on its current condition and number of years in existence, less any cost to sell this investment property. So if that fair value less the cost to sell a property is less than the current carrying amount, you have a situation of impairment loss that needs to be written off through our profit and loss section. As far as derecognition is concerned, if you sell at any point in time investment property, it should be obviously derecognized. Simple as we had with property, plant and equipment as well. You need to remove it from your statements because it doesn't exist anymore. Or when we withdraw investment property from permanent use, because it does not have any future economic benefits. Because remember, in order to be recognized, we said there should be potential, probable future cash flows or economic benefits for the company. If it is clear that there aren't any future economic benefits anymore, it can't be recognized and kept in the books or in the accounting records still as investment property. It needs to be derecognized. And by derecognition, basically what we are saying is we are removing it from the financial records. Any gains or losses arising from the retirement or disposal of investment property shall be seen as the difference between the net disposal proceeds and the carrying amount. So basically, what is the selling price, the final net selling price? Compare that with the current carrying amount. If you sold it for more than carrying amount, you'll be recognizing a profit in your statement of profit or loss. If, however, the carrying amount is more than what you sold it for, you will recognize a loss in your statement of profit or loss. So this amount of consideration to be included in gain or loss arising from the derecognition of investment property is then determined in accordance with requirements of a transaction price, which we will cover in IFRS 15, revenue from contract with customers. But basically, in short terms, the transaction price is your selling price. Again, there's a willing seller, there's a willing buyer. What is the transaction price that they agreed upon? This will be your net disposable proceed that you're going to receive from the transaction, and that you need to compare with the current carrying amount of the investment property that we are derecognizing either through disposal or retiring the investment property and having to derecognize it. As far as disclosure is concerned, what needs to be disclosed in terms of investment property? In terms of both, so if you use either or the fair value or the cost module, you need to disclose whether it applies, obviously, which one. So in your accounting policy and notes, you will identify that you are using either the fair value module for disclosure and of your investment property, or you are using the cost module. When classification is difficult, the criteria it uses to distinguish investment property from owner-occupied property and from property held for sale in the ordinary course of business. For example, that is the scenario where I sketch for you. We have a building which we have used as owners and occupied as owners, but also some of the floors are rented out. So then it's difficult to distinguish what exactly is that building. Is it PPE or is it investment property? So in our accounting policy and notes, we need to identify what classification does this company apply in order to distinguish, which might be, as we said, on floor space occupied. The extent to which the fair value of investment property is based on a valuation by an independent qualified valuer who holds a recognized and relevant professional qualification and has a recent experience in location and category of the investment property being valued. If there has been no such valuation, that fact needs to be disclosed as well. So normally what you will find in the accounting notes each year is the details of this professional and when, if he made a valuation the current year, the date of the valuation and the value of the evaluation. And as we've said, stipulate here, if there was no valuation in the current year, that fact needs to be disclosed as well. The amounts recognized in profit or loss for the rental income from investment property, okay, which will be as part of your income, the rental that you received, any direct operating expenses, including repairs and maintenance, arising from investment property that generated rental income during the period. So repairs and maintenance that we had on those properties incurring rental income, any direct operating expenses, also including repairs and maintenance arising from investment property that did not generate rental income during the period. Because remember now, we can have two types of investment properties, those that are rented out, but they also require some operating expenses, and we might have investment property that we only keep for capital appreciation. So it's not rented out, but they also require some repairs and maintenance, and those direct operating expenses needs to be disclosed in your financial statements. Any contractual obligations to purchase, construct, or develop investment property, or for the repairs, maintenance, or enhancements. So if there's any obligation that we have signed and can't get out of, in order to purchase, construct, develop investment property in future, this needs to be disclosed separately in your accounting notes as well. In addition to this disclosures above, an entity that applies the fair value model shall also disclose a reconciliation between the carrying amounts of investment property at the beginning and the end of the period. So if there has been a change in those values, it needs to be disclosed separately in a note called investment property itself. So that note should then disclose what caused the differences between the opening and the closing balances, which can either be through new additions, new investment property added, disclosing separately those additions resulting from acquisition, so new property, and those resulting from subsequent expenditure, recognizing the carrying amount of an asset. So here we might have an existing investment property that required maintenance during the year. To enhance the value of that property, it will be classified as a capital expenditure, and therefore it will be added to the cost of the original cost price of the investment property. Whereas a new acquisition is purely a new investment property that we purchased. Any net gains or losses from fair value adjustments. So as we've said, you need to do these fair value adjustments at the end of each financial year. If there is a gain, an increase in value, or a loss, a decrease in value, those fair value adjustments needs to be disclosed separately. And that is basically as far as the theory part of investment property is concerned. So initially, the definition on how to identify whether we are dealing with investment property, Then the recognition requirements. What value do we recognize and how do we go about in recognizing initially investment property, being the cost as well as associated transaction costs? Then as far as subsequent measurement is concerned, we can either adopt the cost module, keep it at cost, or the fair value module by determining the fair value at the end of each financial period. And then finally, what needs to be disclosed over and above just the values in the financial statements, but all additional alternate or additional information that needs to be disclosed with regards to and relating to investment property. So let's see now if we do the application through a few practical examples and how we're focusing on the types of questions that might arise during an assessment or exam scenario. I'm going to work through 3 examples with you. Example number 1. Tinta Limited is a company which is rapidly expanding. The company owns several properties that are occupied in different manners. First of that, property 1. Tinta expanded its business to a small rural town and has bought an old house that was converted to offices for the company. The business operated by Tinta in this town is still growing, and the house is therefore not fully occupied by the company. The house has a small flatlet attached to it that is currently being rented out. This part of the house will eventually also be occupied by the business. Okay, so that is our first property. Our second property. Tinta owns a piece of land in Johannesburg. There is the possibility that this piece of land will be expropriated by the local council for the construction of a new road. Tinta Limited's original intention with buying this land was to develop its head offices there. Now Tinta has decided to wait for the final decision of the local council before erecting the new offices on this land. So that is their second property. The third property is Tinta and another company occupying a building that Tinta owns. The other company pay market-related rental to Tinta Limited. This building is occupied in a ratio of 30 to 70% by Tinta and the other company, respectively. So 30% occupied by Tinta, 70% by the other company. The intention is that Tinta Limited and the other company will move to the respective new head offices once they have been erected, and that the existing building will then be held until it can be sold for a good price. So once they've evacuated this building, they will keep this building and try to sell it until they get the price that they want for this building. So those are the 3 properties that we have. We are now required to classify these properties as either investment properties or owner-occupied properties in the accounting records of Tinta Limited. Support your answer with reasons for your classification of the property. So it means it's a discussion type of question where you have to use the principles applied in either IAS 16 PPE, owner-occupied, or IAS 40, which deals with investment property, in order to answer whether you will classify property 1, 2, and 3 as either a property, plant, and equipment, owner-occupied, or as an investment property. So let's look at property 1. Property 1 will be classified as an owner-occupied property used in the supply of services or to produce goods. In this instance, to supply just services. The supply of these services generates cash flow that is attributable not merely to this property, but also to other assets used in the business of Tinta Limited. So this is their main business activity from which they generate their cash flows. The services supplied from this office are the most significant component of the whole arrangement. The letting out of the flat to tenants is an ancillary service and does not change the classification of this building as an owner-occupied property. Okay, so if you just go back to the property, remember we said the business by Tinta in the town is still growing and the house is therefore not fully occupied by the company. But the initial intention when they bought this was to be converted to offices. The house has a small flatlet that is rented out, but this is just a small part of the actual house. The main intention bought the house to be converted to office, hence the classification as owner-occupied, because the services that will be generated from this property will basically be the same as generated through other assets used in the business by Tinta. So the services supplied from this home office are the most significant component of this whole arrangement, and as such, it can't be seen as investment property, but it will be classified as owner-occupied property. Regarding property 2, this will be classified as an owner-occupied property as well. A property that is held for future development and subsequent use as owner-occupied property is not investment property, but must be classified as owner-occupied property. Okay, so if we go back to this property, they own a piece of land in Johannesburg. Okay, there's the appropriation, but the original intention when we bought this land was to develop its head offices there. So if you're going to develop your head office there, the head office will be owner-occupied for the main business activities. So based on the initial intention, the classification will be done. Hence, it will be classified as owner-occupied property. The mere fact that there is uncertainty currently to the ultimate use of this land because of the outstanding decision of the local council does not change the intention to build its head office of the piece of land. Okay, because remember they said now, Tinta has decided to wait for the final decision of the local council before erecting the offices on this land. There is still a possibility that they won't erect or can't erect there if it is expropriated. But based on the initial intention, you can't otherwise recognize it as investment property at this point in time. It should be recognized as property, plant, and equipment based on the initial intention to develop its head office over there. Therefore, property 2 then also a owner-occupied property. Property 3, a little bit more difficult, because here it will be difficult to classify because Tinta and another company basically occupy the same property. So in this instance, judgment must be used by determining whether this property qualifies as investment property in the records of Tinta Limited. So Tinta will have to develop the criteria to exercise judgment in accordance with the definition of investment property. The criteria applied must be disclosed when the classification is difficult. The fact that less than 50% of the building is occupied by Tinta, because remember they said they occupy 30%. And therefore used in the production of goods or the supply of services or for administrative purposes means that the majority of the building is occupied by tenants. The building can, based on this justification, therefore be classified as investment property, as we've said, depending on the criteria used by Tinta. So if Tinta is from the viewpoint that if it's less than 50%, it is insignificant, then they can classify the entire property as investment property. The possible change in use in future does not influence the classification of the property at this stage. So even though they say that the intention is that the other company will move to the respective new offices once they have been erected and the existing building will then be held until it can be sold for a good price. The building is currently occupied by both companies. So that was the intention. It is owner occupied. It can't change your original intention. But based on the occupation, in that only 30% is basically occupied by Tinta for the production of goods or the supply of services or for administrative purposes, means that the majority of the building is rented out. Rented out falls under the definition of your investment property. Hence, based on that judgment, they will be able to classify this entire property as investment property, but they will have to classify and justify it in the notes by stipulating the criteria that was applied in disclosing and the classification of this property, because it is difficult due to the fact that it's occupied by two different parties. Okay, and that would be example one. I hope it was quite clear and how you need to approach a question like this, and the classification and explanation provided to maximize the mark allocation. If we move on to example two, Khulisi is a manufacturing company and has year end of 31 December 2024. The following details are available relating to its fixed property. They acquired land with an office building on 1 January 2024 for 5 million rand, consisting of the cost of the land of 1,325,000 and the building of 3,695,000. Khulisi also paid an agent's commission and legal fees, respectively, of 50 and 20,000 to acquire this property. From 1 January, Khulisi made improvements to the building amounting to 560,000. This subsequent expenditure meets the subsequent recognition criteria as contained in IAS 40 investment property. So what does this mean? It is seen as a subsequent expenditure to enhance the value of the asset. Therefore, it is capital of nature and needs to be added to the original cost price. So it won't be seen as a pure operating expense. It is to enhance the value. It needs to be capitalized. The land and buildings were available for use as intended by management, as well as brought into use and rented out to the tenant on 31 March 2024. Rental agreement was signed and the tenant took occupation of the building on 1 April 2024. Okay, so basically there is the information to classify this as investment property, because this land and building is rented out. So it is an ancillary cash flow that comes in separated from your main business activities. Therefore, we need to classify this land and building as investment property. An independent sworn appraiser provided Khulisi of the following values of the property at year end. The land is deemed to be worth 1.6 million and the building is worth 4,150,000. As per the accounting policies of Khulisi, all investment property is accounted for using the fair value module once initially recognized. Ignore that and all amounts are material. So we are required to prepare the journal entries in accounting records of Khulisi to correctly account for the revaluation of the property for the year ended. Okay, so not it's purely the revaluation in fair value that has taken place. Then we also need to prepare the investment property note at end of year. Because remember, we said one of the disclosure requirements, if you use the fair value model, there needs to be a reconciliation done between opening and closing values. So first of all, we need to recognize the cost at which we will recognize and measure the investment property. This was first of all the purchase price, 5,020,000. Additional expenses incurred to secure this, the transaction costs that are integral in the acquisition, was agent's commission and legal fees, which needs to be added to the cost price. So the 50 and 20, the 70,000 in total added. So originally the total cost of this property is 5,090,000. Now, the problem is with allocating these expenses to the two different components of the investment property. Because remember, the total purchase price of 5,020,000 comprised out of land and building. The land having a cost of 1,325,000, the buildings having a cost of 3,695,000. So adding those two together gives us a 5,020,000. But how do we appropriate and allocate the agents and legal fees between these two different properties? The only way that you can do it is in the ratio of each original cost, okay, separately for land and buildings, and then allocate the total value once we've added the transaction costs. So therefore, we would say, right, the total value is now 5,090,000. Allocated to land is based on the cost of the land on the total cost price. So just the cost price of the land, which is 5,020,000. That is a percentage allocated to land, which will give us land a value of 1,343,476. Buildings, we will again allocate the total value now incorporative of the transaction costs, 5,090,000 based on only the cost of the buildings on the total cost price for the building for the property. And therefore we'll allocate 3,746,524. So these two added together will give us a 5,090,000. So all that we've done here is apportioned the 15 and 20,000 based on the ratio in difference in cost to land and buildings separately. So the investment property note, if we get to that first, the carrying amount at the beginning of the year is 0. Because remember, we only acquired these investment properties at the beginning of the year. Then we need to show distinguish between addition from acquisition. And this is the two values that we've created or calculated just now. The total initial cost of the land is the initial cost price of 1,325,000 plus the apportionment of the transaction cost allocated to land. The same for building. Gives us our total cost of 5,090,000. The addition from subsequent expenditure was the 560,000 spent on building, which will be capitalized and added to the cost price of the building itself. As far as the fair value adjustment is concerned, we need to determine at the end of the year what's the difference between the fair value and the current carrying amount of these specific properties. So land, the individual appraiser or the independent appraiser determined to be 1,600,000. The current carrying amount is 1,343,476. So an increase in value of 256. The building was valued at the end of the year at 4,150,000. The cost initially was the 3,746. As well as an additional 560,000 that we spent during the year on the maintenance. So here we've got a loss in value of 156,524. So in net on the investment property, we've got a gain of 256, a loss of 156, a net increase of 100,000 in investment property value. Or if you just take the total values, investment property fair value at the end of the year is 5,750,000, which is the 1.6 plus a 4,150,000. Less the original cost price of investment property, which is 590,000, including the cost of the land, the cost of the building, and your additional transaction expenses. Less the subsequent expenditure during the year means in total investment property increased by 100,000 in the current year. So on the note, we will show the fair value adjustment separately. Land increasing by 256 to leave a closing carrying amount of 1.6. Building decreasing by 156 to leave a closing value of 4,150,000. But still a net increase of 100,000 in fair value and a total fair value at the end of the year of 5,750,000. And that would be then the journal entry. A net increase of 100,000. So the investment property in the statement of financial position will increase by 100,000 by debiting it. And we will create a fair value adjustment that will go through our profit and loss of 100,000 Rand, which is your total fair value adjustment at year end. So that would be then the solution to this example, the journal entry, just recording the net fair value adjustment. And then your investment property note with the reconciliation between opening and closing values did not have any opening balances. These were our acquisitions. This was our subsequent expenditure, our fair value adjustments, and our closing balances as at the end of the year. Okay, then on to our final example, example number 3. ABC Properties acquired a vacant piece of land during the current financial year for 515,000, which is currently held for an undetermined future use. Transaction costs amounting to 20,000 were incurred directly relating to the acquisition of the vacant land. On the date of acquisition, there's a clear evidence that the fair value of this property cannot be reliably determined on a continuing basis, since comparable market transactions are infrequent and alternative reliable estimates of fair value are not available. The financial director is unsure of how this vacant land should be classified and measured, and has asked you, the financial accountant, to investigate this and report back to him. The accounting policy of ABC Properties states that investment property is accounted for in accordance with the fair value model, while owner-occupied property is accounted for in accordance with the cost model. So with this information, we are asked to prepare a memorandum in response to this inquiry by the financial director about the classification and measurement, initial as well as subsequent, of the vacant land, with reference to IAS 40 investment property and IAS 16 property, plant and equipment where appropriate. And your answer must comply with requirements of international financial reporting standards. So being asked to draft a memorandum, it needs to be in a formative of the memorandum. So address it to the person requesting it, which is the financial director, indicating that it is from you, the financial accountant, and the clear subject, the classification and initial subsequent measurement of vacant land. Provide the date of this memorandum. Start off by saying, dear sir, madam, please find below the outcome of the inquiry into the matter about the classification and initial and subsequent measurement of the vacant land. Classification of vacant land. IAS 40 defines investment property as property, being either land or building, held to earn rental income or for capital appreciation or both, so your peer definition, rather than for use in the production and supply of goods and services or for administrative purposes, which will then be your owner-occupied property in terms of IAS 16. In terms of IAS 40, any land, specifically land only, held for currently undetermined future use is regarded as land held for capital appreciation. Therefore, the vacant land would be classified as investment property and not as owner-occupied property. So the clear distinction there between investment based on the intention on when we acquire this piece of land. It's an undetermined future use, and therefore it should be classified as investment property. As far as initial measurement is concerned, investment property shall be measured initially at cost, and any transaction cost must be included in initial measurement. So any transaction cost associated with obtaining the investment property. Therefore, the vacant land will be measured initially at the amount paid, which is the cost price of 550, and the associated transaction cost of 20,000. So we need to measure and recognize the land at 535,000 rand. As far as subsequent measurement is concerned, IAS 40 requires a company to choose either the fair or the cost model as its accounting policy for subsequent measurement, and the policy must apply to all investment property owned by the company. Since ABC accounting policy for investment property is a fair value model, the vacant land must be measured at fair value at the end of the year. So just indicating what the options are, but in this example, it was clear that they have already chosen the fair value, and therefore all investment property, including the land here, should be measured at fair value. There is, however, presumption that a company will be able to reliably measure this fair value in order to utilize a fair value on a continuing basis, unless at date of acquisition of the property, there is clear evidence that the fair value of this property cannot be reliably determined on a continuing basis. This arises when and only when comparable market transactions are infrequent and alternative reliable estimates of fair value are not available. In such cases, investment property shall be measured using the cost model. The residual value should be 0, and IAS 16 shall be applied until disposal of the property. So in this example, this was applicable because the vacant land owned by ABC Properties, the information provided indicates that on the date of acquisition of this vacant land, there is a clear evidence that the fair value of this property cannot be determined on a continuing basis, since comparable market transactions are infrequent or alternative. Reliable estimates of fair value are not available. This, after initial recognition, the vacant land will be carried at a cost price of 535,000 Rand and may be reduced by any impairment losses. Because remember, in this instance with land, we do not provide the depreciation, so you only need to be on the lookout for any impairment losses where the fair value will fall below the cost of 535,000 Rand. And then just closing off by citing that by basically addressing and discussing all the issues required in terms of the question itself. And that is my session for today. Thank you so much for your attendance. I hope things are a little bit clearer on investment property. I shall now close my presentation, and then we have some 15 minutes or so to look at any questions that you might have on the session today. Thank you once again. Okay, I'm going to run through all the questions that you might have. Okay, let's just see these with the initial just to recognize that you can hear me. Can you see all I can see? Okay, then we have here. I wanted to ask regarding assessment too, since was curious if it still have some form of doing full statements, do we start moving away from that in assessments? Like we're doing in the exams. I wanted to know if we'll be able to get an example of assessment two statements will be asked if it's not doing full assessments anymore. Okay, with regards to assessments and exams, it will basically consist of a combination of questions. So there will be questions which are pure like discussion questions, like we had in example number 3 now, or it will still be with regards to maybe not a full set of financial statements, but disclosure with regards to specific components, like example, the investment property note that we have, where you still have to disclose that specific investment property note with regards to investment property. So again, it will be a full combination of questions consisting of discussion type of questions, disclosures type of questions, and maybe a small section of disclosure in a financial statement. For example, only your current assets or only your non-current assets, or only the profit before tax part. So it will be a full combination of everything that can be expected in a exam and assessment scenario. I hope that answers your question. And that was the only other question that I can see so far. Any other questions, please paste them there in the Q&A section, and I will have a look and address those questions. I've just seen on a previous question here under my model site, where can one get the previous classes recording and slide used for those classes? Okay, so if you go onto our model site, if you go in the navigation tab, you just scroll down, and at the bottom section, you will find the different online classes. They are listed online class 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then under each respective online class, you will basically then find the recording as well as the slides for that specific session. Okay, I don't see any new questions coming in. We still have a few minutes left in the session, still 10 minutes left. You are more than welcome to post any questions that you might have. Okay, are we getting any tutors this year? Unfortunately, it seems like the decision was taken by initial management to do away with tutors. So their suggestion there will be to contact your local regional office and maybe ask them if they do still have any tutors available. We are not sure about that process, or then maybe source a private tutor to assist you with the accounting. But as far as in the past we had electronic or e-tutors, all of those have unfortunately been done away with. So the best will be to contact your local regional office and establish if there are still maybe any tutors in place. Okay, what learning units do we need to cover for assessment 2? Assessment 2 will just have to look under lesson tool 0. If you go under lesson tool 0, you will have an diagram there, or a table showing the different assessments that will be covered. But basically, this next assessment will cover study units or lesson tools 1 to 7. So it will be the 4 that you needed to cover for yesterday, and then we'll also then incorporate and include investment property, plant and equipment, and leases. But as I say, just go under lesson tool 0, and there you will find a breakdown of all assessments, their contributions, their topics covered, their dates, everything. It is listed on our module site. Okay, still looking for any new questions. Nothing new coming through at the moment. Still 7 minutes remaining for our session. Any questions that you do have on the session, feel free to just drop them in there in the Q&A section, and yeah, I'll do my best to answer those questions for you. I'm just seeing if it's updating. No new questions coming through at this stage, so hopefully an indication that you are happy with the session today. Everything is clear and understood, and you don't have any other questions or concerns at this point in time. But yeah, like I said, it's still a few minutes left. Feel free, any questions that you might have, to just pop them there in the Q&A section, and I will address those questions for you. Okay, joint costs from lesson unit 4. Are we supposed to study them? I'm asking because they're not covered in the slides you shared. Okay, I obviously didn't present that class, so I wouldn't know, but joint costs form part of the study material. So if it's part of the study material, then yes, you need to study those. Remember, as far as these sessions are concerned, it is impossible to cover each and every little component contained within a lesson tool. So we try to cover the broad part, the definitions, theory, and then through a few practical examples. But we can't simply fit in the period that we have each and every possible scenario. So if anything is in the study material, it is indeed applicable, and it needs to be studied and has an opportunity to appear in an assessment or in an exam situation. If there's anything maybe that's unclear on joint cost, then you're more than welcome to get in touch with us and ask a specific question regarding that. Okay, still 5 minutes in our session for any new questions that you might have. Okay, I did answer the question on previous class recordings. I've now answered the question on the joint costs. Okay, I saw a message about a scammer posing as tutor, and now you say we must sort our own tutor. How do we know if they are lit or not? Are they recommended by NISA? You will have to do your own investigation there. Then normally we do find that if you just randomly received a message from someone, we don't know how they get hold of your information, but be very careful. Do your homework, research that person, because in many instances they will advertise free classes, but once you've signed up, they require payment to be made. And yeah, we unfortunately, it's impossible to determine who is legit and who not out there, but there are indeed many scammers out there. So just do a little bit of research, make sure that everything is up to standard before you sign up for any of these classes. We, at this stage, and as far as UNISA is concerned, I'm not aware of any tutors that are being recommended specifically. So that is something that everyone in the individual capacity will need to try and sort out. But then, yeah, again, obviously, as I've said, if you've got any questions or issues with regards to the study material itself, you are more than welcome to get in touch with us for any assistance. There's still time for one last question or two. We've still got a minute or two in the session. Any final questions that you might have? Okay, still 2 more minutes in our session. Feel free to pose any last questions there before we close off our session for today. So we remove any subsequent cost of replacing or upgrades when we determine the gain or loss in fair value model. Okay, not 100% sure understand this, but initially you recognize investment property at cost, including transaction price. So that would be your cost that you originally recognize. If you have any subsequent expenses incurred that will enhance the value of the asset, it will be capitalized and needs to be added to the cost price. So the new cost price will be the original amount recognized plus the increase in value. That you then compare with the fair value at the end of the year. And if that fair value is now more than the carrying amount, it will be a gain. If it is less, it will be a loss that we need to recognize. I hope that is clear. Okay, the reason for doing away with tutors, with our situation, doing all the research, it will cost me study time and the institution is not making it better for student. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that. That is the decision that was made by the management. It came through to us. We were not involved in that process. So we are not sure for the reason behind that. I do understand it's difficult to get hold of a tutor. But like I say, we also from our side don't have the capacity to go out and search for valid tutors and endorse those tutors to use our material. So therefore, the option then available is, like I said, any issues that you have, get in touch with us. We've got an email, we've got a discussion forum, we've got a message function. Get in touch with us and we will try our utmost to assist with any queries or issues that you might have in that regard. I do understand the frustration, unfortunately, out of our hands as well. Okay, we are nearly, or our time has expired, but I will give one more question. If you've got one more question, I will quickly have a look at that. If not, I will close the session, and then later this afternoon, this recording should be available. If you still have any questions on investment property, feel free to get in touch with us, and we will address those questions or concerns that you might still have. Okay, just looking for an update, any new questions that you might have. Nothing coming through as yet. Just going to give it another minute and see if it updates. Okay, no new questions coming through. I think I'm then going to close the session. Thank you so much for your attendance. As I say, I hope that you enjoyed the session, that it contributed to giving you a better understanding of this investment property section. If not, feel free to get in touch with us with any questions you might have. And then just look out for the announcements in the next few weeks for the next classes. Next week it will be leases. And then the week after that, I think it will be financial instruments. So just keep a lookout for those announcements with the dates and times. Normally, as we said, we keep it on a Thursday from 11. So just keep a lookout for any new announcements that are made. And yeah, that is the end of our session for today. I don't see any new questions coming through. Thank you so much for your attendance. Keep well. We'll be in touch again. Until next time, God bless. Thank you and goodbye.